Thank you so much for inviting the UN Chamber Music Society on occasion of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science. The program today is going to be in the spirit of feminism, tech, and the world. So the first piece we're going to perform is by Gia Rushidat from Saudi Arabia. And I'm purposely programmed her into the program because there are very, very few female composers in music history. And women are frequently marginalized in the history of classical music. Second piece, which we will perform, is a piece by Lily Boulanger from France. Third piece is from China, Christopher Tin, who won 2 Grammy Awards for this album called Calling All Dawns. And finally, we will finish with Africa, Baba Yetu, also by Christopher Tin. And it is one of the most beautiful pieces and uplifting pieces you will hear. It is also a very techie themed piece because this theme is at the opening of a video game called Civilizations. So I hope you will enjoy the music. Thank you so much to each and every one of my amazing musicians, James, Florrie, Johnna, Eva, and Drake. They are phenomenal, and they are going to play their hearts out today. And thank you, UN Women, for your presence, and we're so grateful to have you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for organizing this. It's a very important day for us. So
Yes, today is the United Nations Women and Girls in Science Day.
yes.
So why don't we start off with what does that mean? What does having a UN day mean to?
I mean, so for those who don't know, this International Day has existed it came about through a resolution. We are very good at the UN with resolutions, and this is another way to institute something that is very important. So it was, in this case, the initiative of the government of Malta that took another group of member states with them and said, this is a very important issue. To have women and girls in science is critical for our future. And they adopted this resolution and gave UNESCO and UN Women the role to kind of carry the flag once a year. So for us, it's key. I mean, science, no matter what science we are talking about, it's social science, computer science, natural science, all of these areas are key to the society. And it's key to the future. As you know, you're inventing a lot here at Google. And it's very important that we have parity for many, many different reasons, but also that the work that we do in science actually mirrors what's out there in society. So if we have 50-50 men and women in society, we want to make sure that science also carries that kind of same divide.
And so everybody here has these women's empowerment principles on their chair. What do these mean? What do these represent?
So I said that the International Day is turning 5 years this year. These are turning 10 years, and Google is the signatory of these principles, for those who didn't know. Last year, we have another very important day, International Women's Day, on 8th of March. That might be more common to you. It's been around for quite some time, whereas the International Day on Women in Science is just 5 years. But these principles is a broad agenda for gender equality and women's empowerment that we ask companies to take charge of. For those who know about the Sustainable Development Goals, this is the implementing agenda for the SDG 5 on gender equality and women's empowerment. So it's very concrete. It covers the CEO of Google signed, and all the companies that have signed. We have about 2,800 companies from across the world that have signed these principles, and they all have the CEO making the commitment and then try to rally through the organization. And we have principle 2, 3, and 4 focus on workplace issues, so internal to Google. Principle 5 focus on 2 different very, very important things. One is, who do you buy from? So when you buy your beautiful kitchen out there, the coffee, the nuts, who do you buy from? Are you buying from women's local business? Are you thinking about buying from local business and women's business in particular? But the other one is around marketing and advertising, to make sure that whatever marketing and advertising that you do is not reinforcing gender stereotypes or negative stereotypes. So we can go into a little bit more on stereotypes because it's a very important topic. But also principle 6 is how you engage with local communities, which I've seen also upstairs, Grow with Google, is an opportunity to bring in the local community. And that's very important, not only to show what the company can do, but also to hear and listen of the community, including women and girls, on what their views and opinions are, and maybe they also have ideas that can be taken to the next level. The last one is what we're working really hard on this year, is to determine how do we measure this progress. So while we know it's been 10 years since we have it, and we have many commitments, we need to now also show what has been result of all this effort.
And if you weren't lucky enough to be here and you want to see these, they're also at empowerwomen.org/WEPs or WEPs.org. So I was curious to dive into number 1 and number 7 a little more. So establish high-level corporate leadership for gender equality. What in practice does that mean? What are we seeing how is that being embodied in companies?
Mm-hmm. So it depends a little bit on companies. Some policies are really kind of bottom up. Here we're asking to have both bottom up and top down. We know that the way that a CEO or the C-suite people are driving the company, if they have full commitment to gender equality, you will see it in their behavior, you will see it in their decisions, and that's why it's very important for us that it comes from the top. Concretely, it means that they are developing or set in motion policies on gender equality. It might be around flexible working hours. It might be around parental leave. It might be around having on-site childcare. It can be a lot of different things that is important. Many solutions also come bottom up. And then if they are aware of those solutions, they can be replicated across. We've seen in some companies that they also like to have in different countries, different CEOs signing up in those different countries so that they own it at the country level. It depends on the company if they want to come it from the top woman or man, or if they wanted also to have other commitments lower down in the company.
So one of the things that I think is top of mind for companies like Google as we continue to grow at an enormous rate around the globe is these policies affect people across each country and oftentimes different cultures. We've definitely seen that internally, is whether we're talking about promotion rates being equitable across gender and race, or we're talking about hiring patterns, the culture of the way, even just something as simple as self-nominating for promotion, the way we talk about ourselves might be different from culture to culture. So UN being a global organization, have you run into this before? What are some ways that you tackle the same policy could be interpreted or enacted differently by different parts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think one example that I just had a discussion last week with a bank, a Spanish bank, where they had a really interesting take on a solution in Spain. And then when I asked the people here in New York, like, have you implemented the same policy here? And said, we don't need it here. And basically in Spain is a culture of presence in the office counts towards promotions. And basically the staff was bank staff was sitting till 9-10 o'clock at night doing their thing, because they thought that would give them better opportunities and prospects for promotions. Could be also heavy workload, but basically culture also was that women are carrying most of the responsibilities for the children and for other caretaking. So the women had to go home at a reasonable hour to take care of those responsibilities, and the guys were hanging out in the office for maybe another 4 or 5 hours. So it became a little bit unfair, and as a committed company to create that justice and fairness among staff, they try different ways of getting people to leave and offer that flexibility in hours and working modalities, whether you work from home or in the office, does it matter? In Spain, it does. And basically, they had to take a very radical decision. At 7 o'clock now, they're closing down everything. So no more shuttles, no more cafes. There's nothing, no services provided. There are a few guys still sitting around in the office. But they had to make that radical change. So they took really the local culture into account. And at least they're trying to even the playing field for women and men, despite the culture outside the company.
So it seems like it very much requires sometimes bespoke handcrafting per culture. You need to understand how each culture is interpreting and their individual problems.
Yeah. So you could have a broad policy in the company for flexibility and remote working, but then how does it work out in reality in the country where the company is operating might play out differently depending on the country.
So I'm curious to dive a little bit more into the Women and Girls in Science Day, and sort of first open up, if from your perspective, what are some of the big initiatives we're seeing? Because the UNESCO report said, I got it here, fewer than 30% of the world's scientific researchers are women, and women in science, technology, engineering, and maths are published less, paid less for their research, and do not advance as far as men in their careers. That problem statement seems very clear and tangible. So I mean, that can feel like a mountain to climb. Where are we starting with this, first from your perspective?
I mean, I think something that we all can relate to is when we were kids and what we were looking in our close surroundings on our aspirations for what we wanted to do. My mom was a teacher, and I, of course, my first aspiration was to become a teacher because that's what you see close to you. So if you don't know, and I didn't even know the UN existed, so how can I aspire to work for the UN? But you really have that very, very close surrounding that shapes the minds of boys and girls on what they want to do. A boy that doesn't know that you can go to the moon would never aspire to be an astronaut, or a girl for that matter. So it's really about showing children from the outset what are the possibilities, what can you be and what can you become. And then we hear in some cultures, girls are put down for math is not for girls, math is for boys. So it's really, we have responsibilities both as parents, as siblings, as co-workers, depending on the age where you go, to really foster that. It doesn't matter if you're boy or girl, you can do it. And it's sometimes you need to be very explicit about it. I myself, I pursued initially an engineering education, and I was already 16, 17, 18 when I felt like I was pushed back from the teachers that was not really something for girls. So I switched, which I regret sometimes, but otherwise I wouldn't be here to tell the story.
Glad you're here, but somewhat unfortunate, the story.
So there are many things that we can. It's very much around stereotypes. We have in UN Women an initiative about stereotypes and marketing and advertising that is very important because that's one vehicle. Family, education systems, workplaces, they're all different institutions that shape the minds of what you can do and not do.
We have the UNESCO data from 2014 to 2016 shows that globally, female students' enrollment is particularly low in information and communications technology, where women represent only 3%, and natural science, math, and statistics, where the figure is 5%.
So I wanted to add one point. In a fast paced area, like whether it is natural science or whether it is research and development, you talked about researchers, or whether computer programming or whatever it might be, it's moving very, very fast. And if the system, the enabling system is not there for women to pursue their careers, often because of the society tells that to be a good mother, you need to be the one that takes care of the children, right? We can help change that and enable men to also take paternity leave. And it's actually a practice in one company in Australia that says, okay, if you, woman, get a child and your husband takes the paternity leave, you will, during that period, get 150% of the salary. So this is a way to kind of foster that behavioral change to men taking more responsibilities for parental leave. And once you are in recruitment of women scientists, no matter the discipline, you would no longer think, oh, she's 30, 35, she will have a child soon if she doesn't already have it, and she'll be out, and all these kind of stereotypes that we have, because suddenly it could equally be the man taking the leave. To be home, and he might be the one that stays home when the child is sick. So then you will even the playing field. And that is also linked to the cost of childcare. If it is too costly and it evens the salary and the childcare, then you might just choose to stay home for a few years. And women are kind of falling behind in the career tracks. So there's a company like Google might have re-entry programs to help onboard those women again, because you have already invested in them and have a certain interest of keeping them in the company.
I think that's a fantastic example, particularly because there's a lot of discussion I've seen in terms of whether bringing women into tech is, and the sciences in general, how much of it is a pipeline problem versus a policy problem. And your example is really interesting because you showed there's both the matter of do I see that as a career path for me? Is that even something I'd aspire for? But then there's also the matter of how convenient do we make it in order for women to have an equal footing in this role? How much do we try to eliminate risk of unconscious bias in terms of maternity leave? So from your perspective, how much do you see between these two different factors, the just getting women into this pipeline in the first place, getting them to go into these classes, these career paths, versus the policies the companies have to make it equally and equitably viable?
Yeah, I think it's equally important. I mean, there are different things that if you see a workplace with predominantly men, you might not necessarily think that this is a workplace that will work for you as a parent because of those stereotypes and because of those. And we are the carriers, women ourselves, the carriers of these stereotypes. We also think that we need to stop our careers, and women do so 2-3 years before they actually will have the child, because they what if I get the child in 9 months and then suddenly I will have more responsibilities. How will I deal with that? So we are kind of stopping our careers too early, and we shouldn't at all. I mean, you should be able in today's world to have a family, take care of children, and have a really good career. So there are some factors that women have in them because they've been told so their whole entire life. Then you have, on top of it, the men have those thoughts because they also been ingrained with those thoughts, even from their own mothers, possibly. And then you have society that tells you this. So there's this instinct in us that makes us do and things that is not to our favor. And then, but then when the company comes in with those policies, it wakens up people to say, but maybe actually, if there is a strong paternity leave in this company, maybe this is a company for me that would allow me for my husband to take leave as well. There are, I mean, we can talk about it the whole day because there are so many good examples of how policy and the stereotypes interact with each other.
Yeah, sort of feeding off each other in many cases.
Yeah, but a good progressive policy can actually make a really good statement to say, we are a company that believes in this. And that's how the leadership comes in again to reinforce those messages in the annual town hall or whatever you have, where you kind of reinforce those messages.
Bring the values top down.
Yeah.
In the spirit of Principle 7, measuring and reporting on progress, Google does publish annually a diversity report that has our numbers for our body broken down in different verticals and ways. And so some of the metrics, they're all encouraging. They're moving in the right direction. Hiring of women rose 33% and to 34% in the US, up 2 and 5%. The global women tech hires increased to 25%. Overall, we're up to 23% in tech and overall a 31%. These numbers are all increases. They're all movements, but you still see those numbers are not at all where we'd want them to be. So what are some of the things that you have observed that have been the most impactful and effectful in changing this narrative and changing this story?
So it's a little bit of both push and pull, like the supply and demand of talent. Certainly showcasing being an inclusive company is a very good way. We know that the new generations are very picky with the companies that they choose, and Google has, I think, a good eye on what the new generations of talent actually want. I think there's ways, so there's, for some reason I have a lot of examples from banks, but I think they're struggling too. We see both the tech sector and the banking financial sector are the ones that have some challenges in getting 50-50 parity in the companies. But a Swedish bank, they tried this for many, many years. They have parity in everything in Sweden, with the exception of business. And actually, I learned last year that only 6% of CEOs in Sweden are women.
Leadership's a whole nother category.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion. But they were trying really hard to kind of keep up with the numbers and really institute parity and all that. And eventually, they said the only way we will do it is they call it 2+1, that for every recruitment, they need to have 2 women presented and 1 man at the minimum.
As the people who are in the room interviewing?
No, the
or
one
presented to a hiring committee?
So the hiring committee needs to have diversity, of course, but also the pool of candidates.
Got you.
And they find it initially very hard. They said, oh, it will take us so much longer to find representatives from both women and men. And they got a pushback, but the leadership said, no, if we are going to get to 50-50, we really need to be serious about this. And from now on, this is law in the company.
That's incredible.
And yeah, so they had to present 2 female candidates and 1 male for each position. And sure, it might take a little bit longer time, but they realized that they were actually taking more time to think of what qualities they actually want from their talent, and not just the quick recruitment just because they want to get it over and done with.
Fall into the same habits of hiring that have been done in the past.
Yeah. And also to kind of look into different pools of talent. Why always grabbing from the same pool of the same university students, the same groups, but really to look at those community colleges, looking at other pools where you might have brilliant stars, but they didn't have the money to pay for education in a fancy university. Yeah. But they are not less brilliant and a contributor to the company than anybody else.
Absolutely.
So it's really kind of dipping into different pools. Also thinking about how the advertisement looks like. As women and men, we look at the ad slightly different. The men look at it and say, oh, I haven't done this, but it's no problem, I'll do it. Whereas the woman looks at it, oh, I haven't done this, no, I won't apply. Let me see if I find something
cultural
else.
thing, different styles of thinking about, do I fit this role?
Yeah, exactly. So it's also about how the ad is formulated to attract more women and girls to apply to those positions.
I feel I'm obliged to ask, what are things that I can be doing more or that we can be doing more as allies? Because I'm always very cognizant of, it can be easy to say, especially as we get into tighter and tighter minorities, maybe Black X or Latinx women, you need to evangelize amongst your community. Well, now we're putting disproportionate burden on this group to fix the problem. What else can we be doing as allies to help this problem?
One concept that I learned in San Francisco is the whole issue of microaggressions that can be turned into micro-progressions. Basically, if there's a person that doesn't always speak, a person that is not always visible, a person that is not always seen as very confident, to give them those micro-progressions, to give them some encouragement in the day-to-day work, to really encourage them and say, that was really well done. And that grows that person's self-confidence in possibly taking on a little bit more other type of roles. There is being, all of you are role models in your communities, in your families, in wherever you go. You're a spokesperson as a member of the Google family to actually talk to young girls and say, you can do it. I could, so you can. And I think that is very important to kind of carry that message around continuously and not let it go, because there's so many that think that they can do it. I think.
Thank you so much. Question from the mic?
I read that in the early days of computer science, like in the early days of the field, I read there were actually a higher percentage of women, and then the percentage of women decreased, I think. Do you have any thoughts on that, maybe?
Yeah, I had read similarly around the dot-com crash. Both genders left, but only men seemed to come back, and that was a big start of the imbalance.
So yeah, I think I actually wrote a paper about this topic.
Ooh,
because it's not only in computer science. It is.
Did you coordinate this question?
No. So it is in a lot of different professions that once the status increases, women are pushed out. Once the work is being automated, women are kicked out or brought in, depending on the process. So if you look at the sewing machine, The sewing machine was initially for men because the U.S. government was sewing for the military, and men were working to create those uniforms. And but then somebody came up with a brilliant idea of doing a household shape of it, like a much smaller version. And here comes a household little, and I think they made it to look like for women as well. And it became a female type of profession out of that invention. Then you can look at the first scribers were men, the ones scribing on big papers. Once it got automated and the typewriter was invented, it became a woman's work. And it has those cycles in most of technology that once it gets either automated and requires and gets a high status, women are kicked out and men are taking over, because also has to do with the payment of the jobs. If it's a higher paid jobs, they're often given to men. It comes a little bit back to the stereotypes that we have in society, that a man, when he goes in to negotiate his salary, he would go in and say, I have 4 children, I need to feed them, I have a wife, I'm
not being paid enough.
Yeah, I'm not paid enough. So it kind of shows us his status of the head of household. Whereas a woman, if she goes in and say, I have 4 children to feed, she will be seen in a completely different way in negotiating on the basis of those same factors.
Given certain cultural expectations.
Yeah, exactly. And she is seen more as a burden for negotiating on behalf of her family, whereas the man is seen different. So it is that culturally ingrained views on what is a woman's job, what is a man's job. And the same thing comes to computer science, where it was initially very, I've seen those movies where you're moving different things when
Punch
you're
cards.
coding.
Yes.
Yeah, whatever that was. When you're punching the cards, and that was a kind of a manual thing, so that was something good for women. But then when it became a little bit higher status and something more scientific, then it became more perceived as a men's job. So it's very complex to kind of just answer it straight off. But I think with some of the other examples, you got a kind of a view of why women have fading in and out. And the same thing comes with in financial crisis. They are trying to keep the men, who are the breadwinners of the family, in the company, and the women are kind of the ones that are coming in and out. So a similar reason.
It's a fascinating connection.
Yes.
One can only hope that the more we learn about it, the better we'll be equipped to fight those unconscious biases, assuming in many of these cases they're unconscious and not intentional.
Assuming.
I'm curious to ask you, with the time we have left, if there's anything you would want to call out to Google. For us, we have a fairly significant role in a slice of this problem. Is there something that you'd like to see us do more of or change, particularly things that we can do grassroots, ground up, since that's still a part of our culture we value very highly?
I have my colleague Diana here. I'm sure she's burning to send you the list. But I think
I'll give you my email after.
I think first, to help implement these women's empowerment principles in Google is one.
To really live these principles.
To live the principles. I think in many aspects you are, but we don't see the results necessarily. I think in Principle 6, which links very much to today's topic, is engagement with women and girls in the community. How can you, when you do go out and speak with schools, I assume you do, or at least the people upstairs, downstairs, Grow with Google.
Yep. There's a bunch of programs that try to get Googlers in classrooms and involved. And
Exactly. And how can they be carrying the same message? How can they be carrying the message that we have these women empowerment principles? How can we get more women and girls involved in the work that you do? It would help you with your pipeline of, if you speak with girls already at a young age, they will be potential Googlers in the future. Speaking with the women that could be involved, but also not to forget the men. Men have a tremendous important role in being as a co-worker, as a manager, as in many different ways to really call out when there's stereotypical comments made, or they might not be aggressive, but it might be things
Just
that,
off.
yeah, and I think it's maybe easier, more politically correct to talk about unconscious bias, assuming that people are not biased.
Sure.
But we are consciously biased. We might have a bias against a certain university. Oh, I won't take somebody from that university. I only know bad things about that. So
No, that's absolutely fair.
we are very biased and as human beings, and we just need to be conscious about both a conscious and unconscious bias.
Awesome.
But yeah, if you can help us get Google to really ingrain this in the company across the world.
Like you said, I think there's opportunity in both directions. We certainly
Yeah.
have a lot of bottom-up work as well that we can
Yeah.
do, and so it's great for
Yeah.
I think all of us to kind of be aware of this as we go out and get
Yeah.
engaged.
Yeah.
Ms. Anna, thank you so much.
No, thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.